Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Experts of Racing podcast. This is the first official Experts of Racing podcast for the actual series. We had the Experts of Esports last week with, of course, one of the guests I have this week who is going to be co-hosting today, Mr. BDF48 Gaming. Of course, you can look back on his introduction last week. Unfortunately, we were planning to have our friend Peyton Short here as well, but due to some family issues, he will not be able to be here. Our thoughts and prayers are with him, though, as he's going through a difficult time right now. But we have two new guests who will be with us throughout this series. It's going to be our F1 news guy, Larry B. the G, and also one of our favorite people to have. He's been with the VER network, a part of the commentary team, races for VER. He's Mr. AJ Shields, aka AJ Gamer, and he's going to be here with us today as well. And speaking of our two new guests, of course, I mentioned that AJ was racing in VER as well, where Larry's the same way, and Larry's one of the admins of VER as well. So we are very lucky and excited to have both these guys here with us today. So with that being said, we're going to hop right in to the news that we have today. So go ahead and just introduce your, let me just reverse back up here for a second. But how are you gentlemen doing today, AJ, Larry, and BDF? Just silence.
I'm doing pretty good. Had to get my audio in, but yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Today's been a very interesting day, to say the least, of news and all the stuff that's kind of going on in racing. Had my deal of events with the league earlier, but all in all, that was a thing. So yeah, now I'm ready to talk about stuff and get that racing news and every other urge to talk about it out of the way. So can't wait.
Certainly, and moving on from AJ, now going to Larry B. the G. Larry, how are you doing, man?
Doing pretty good. Looking forward to talking about some racing today.
Certainly, and moving from Larry to now our good friend BDF48 Gaming. BDF, nice to have you back on the show, man. How are you doing today?
First of all, Larry, you need to speak up. Like, honestly, you've been talking loud the past 24 hours, and you come in and just like, I think we'll be good to go. Anyways, I'm decently excited. There's been a lot of news, even though there's no racing. I think there's quite a few news. I see our hot takes and whatever, and yeah, should be exciting.
Certainly, and speaking of some hot takes, we're going to jump right in it. There's a lot of guys in here that are circulating. Of course, all of us in here are from the United States, and one of the biggest forms of racing in the United States is the NASCAR series.
Motocross.
And there's a lot of news. Motocross, okay. But
Yes,
one of the
motocross is
biggest,
the favorite here in NASCAR.
Here we go. Jesus Christ. But there's been a lot of hot takes coming out of NASCAR right now. NASCAR is one of the biggest thing is the schedule that is coming up. They've released a lot of new things about the schedule, including there's more coming out about the future, as now Bristol, Atlanta, Martinsville, Homestead, and Talladega have all been given dates in which the cars will be returning to full-time racing at those tracks. But we have the Darlington and Charlotte mix-up schedules coming up. And guys, your opinion on NASCAR and their plans on returning, announcing all these dates, do you think this is a little too early? Do you think it's too risky, or do you think the pros definitely outweigh the risks here with these with the new dates of NASCAR coming back on track?
Someone go
Let's
first.
start with BDF. You want to start?
Oh, okay.
BDF or
I guess I'll go first. I don't know. It
Okay.
should be interesting. Of course, this country has been on a halt for a few months because of the coronavirus outbreak, and I feel like NASCAR's trying to get a head start here, trying to get back to financially stable, because obviously, as the world has stopped for a few months, companies are starting to get financially in trouble, and NASCAR's no exception. So I think, I'm not going to say this move was predictable, but I'm going to say I could see this move happening. They're going to be one of the first sports to go out there. I like the idea of racing. I like the idea of having no fans. Let's contain the spread. And I think NASCAR needs to, and I think they will do a good job of trying to make sure this disease doesn't spread throughout crew members and all that stuff. And that was something that they were worried about in F1 too. So, I like the idea. If it's done properly, I think the biggest concern we're going to have is all these races going on at the same time, but I think it's really good for the fans.
Yeah,
And
and to agree on that. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, AJ. Go ahead. You had anything?
Well, I was gonna
Go
say,
ahead.
I agree with BDF to where if these guys do it safe and properly when doing the whole, you know, the whole virus thing, and with these guys or NASCAR trying to do their best of wanting to get back to racing, wanting to get back to the action, I really do think, for me personally, it's really cool to see them back. But also, I really want to see most of the drivers be safe and healthy, and you know, as much as I'm a NASCAR fan, I also, like to be very concerned about them as well, to whether they can be safe, healthy, and in one piece. So, all in all, I think it's a little too early, in my opinion, for them to come back. Did like it to where IndyCar was like, we'll start in July, but if these guys do it right, then we should be good. But if it doesn't go as planned, then there's always holding it off till next year. But all in all, I agree with BDF's opinion on that.
And the big question is, if it comes down to this totally backfires, whether the virus is contracted and spreads throughout the crew members and such, similar to what happened with F1 shutting down. F1 was going to continue operations until a few teams' crew members ended up contracting the virus. Could this be NASCAR's been on the struggling end? We mentioned that. Could this be something that NASCAR has to watch out now from now on, as far as knowing that this could be financially devastating to NASCAR, especially with the merger with ISC that just occurred? They've already released up to 70 employees, and they have been announcing that more releases from their roster will be coming soon, I'd say. So, could this, if this totally backfires, could this be looking at possibly the end or the collapse of NASCAR?
I don't really want to say the
Ooh,
end or
that's a
collapse because there you really can't say the end of something because as we still say because a lot of people like to go on with the conversation that if that NASCAR is dead, to say the least. Honestly, it's not because there are still people, there are still sponsors, and there are still drivers still wanting to do this program. But with this being said, and if someone like, let's say, Ryan Blaney or Cole Custer gets this stuff, with like, the virus, then it's like, it shouldn't really be on halt. Or, I mean, it should, but to say the least, it's really not going to have that much of an effect. It's just going to be like, hey, we're going to pause on this real quick, do this, and we've learned our lesson. So that way, if there's another one like this to where we're at here, then they've learned next time, wait, see what other motorsports do, and then do the exact same thing. Because NASCAR has never been all that wise for some decisions. It has been with some, but not all of it. So, no, I don't think it'll be a downfall of it. It's just going to be more of a lesson learned.
And you mentioned, of course, NASCAR being like the decision. They're not been too wise, but with this decision of NASCAR being one of the few sports coming back to mainstream, um, of course, that's expected to possibly build the fan base, being one of the few sports that are still going to be actively going on. Do you think that could lead to more sports following, such as NFL, or even more racing series like F1 and IndyCar finding a way to substitute their main schedule but still produce a product for modern day sports and racing fans?
I don't think so, to say the least, is because what F1 has got planned and what IndyCar has planned, they're going to stick to their guns and they're going to stick with the decisions they have made, and there really isn't going to be a change because even though NASCAR is coming back early on the 17th, that's still not going to influence people because we've seen the XFL go out of commission because of this. We've seen the AHL closed for the rest of the year due to the virus. So I mean, I don't think most will follow
Who
suit.
cares about the AHL?
Oh God.
But but yeah, I don't really think any sport is going to follow suit. I'm just saying each sport has their own decision of how to take care of this, of their creation. So what NASCAR is doing is what NASCAR wants to do. What IndyCar wants to do is what IndyCar wants to do, and so forth. So yeah.
Larry and BDF, do you agree, or is it the separate point? Do you think there could be more followers after NASCAR's example?
Larry, you can go.
I feel like it's definitely a calculated risk. It could definitely work out since, it'll be first, as AJ said, it'll be one of the first major sports to return amidst the virus, but also you run the risk of potentially spreading it. And even if one of the drivers ends up like getting it, then at that point it's like who knows who in the NASCAR garage could have it. So it's definitely a calculated risk. I do feel it's a bit too early. I would have liked to see them wait until June or July, but I'm interested to see how it'll go.
And we talked about, or we've been talking about prior to the podcast, in the prior weeks leading up to this, that about the switch from them going on track to the virtual world, and we saw how much tension that the iRacing simulator and how NASCAR used that as a substitute for the time being had mixed receptions from fans. A lot of people loved it, some hated it. But do you think that the iRacing series with the Coca-Cola Esports series that iRacing and NASCAR produce, do you think more attention is going to be put onto that as well now as a possible? Do you think more funding and more eyes are going to turn to the more virtual side, looking at iRacing and the simulation that they have going on there?
Yes and no, to say the least. I think if you wanted, with these NASCAR drivers being part of the iRacing virtual series and that having their own pro invitational, it's really cool to see NASCAR drivers doing this. Of course, there are some more experienced on the simulator than others, such as Timmy Hill, William Byron, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Denny Hamlin, and so forth. But if you want to show off the product, have drivers that are already in the pro, that have already done this, like Michael Conti or Ray Alfala, those guys who are in the Nick Ottinger, those guys who are in the iRacing NASCAR's Coca-Cola series. I believe those guys should be racing with the pros, because if you want people to be interested in the product, have people who've done this for a living. If they did it on NASCAR Heat, for example, you had Tyler Reddick, Cole Custer, Christopher Bell, and William Byron on NASCAR Heat, and you wanted to show people why they should get this game and be part of their esports, then have people like Daniel Buttafuoco, have all those other guys that are in the esports.
Nick Walker.
I can't even think. Yeah, BDF
Blade
can list off more than
Rabbit.
I can chew. But with that being said,
Oh yeah.
And of course,
Sloppy, that too.
yeah, Sloppy Joe.
Well,
But to prove the point here, have the guys who are part of the esports of iRacing, have them with the NASCAR Cup.
and BDF, you being the head up guy for VER as far as the esports go, you kind of not only the club owner, but also you control the esports over there. Do you believe this could open up the world for not only just iRacing esports, but open the eyes, looking and glancing more toward all esports of racing, including Tora and Forza, some of the smaller organizations that don't happen to be on that scale? But do you think that could up the popularity of all esports racing, no matter what type or how it comes about?
To be 100% honest with you, I don't see it. In fact, I see that you guys are gonna call me crazy here, but I think, especially with NASCAR, and you talk about the Indy race, with the Indy cars or whatever, I think esports' notoriety goes down solely because of two reasons. Number one, we talked about all this tension that came with, you know, Kyle Larson dropping the bomb. Bubba Wallace lost the sponsor. I mean, professional drivers acting like children. Pagano wrecked Lando Norris. I mean, we're all gonna talk about that. Like, some people don't talk about it, but like that's something that's decently
Well,
big. And then Ferrucci wrecked somebody. You can say,
counter
"Oh, it's just a game. It's just a game." Right, it is just a game, but this is being broadcasted, and I'm not saying if it's right or wrong, but the kind of stuff that has happened has made iRacing and has made these kind of stuff look really bad. Maybe it's not even their fault. It's not even iRacing's fault. It's just the way the drivers are acting on there because they take racing in real life and they don't take racing in video games, simulators, whatever, that serious. So I feel like right as everybody goes back to racing in real life, I feel like iRacing and stuff will drop. But I do think as time progresses, it's going to steadily climb back up to where it is now and maybe go a little further. But right now, I just don't see it.
AJ, you had a point?
I was gonna counter and say that, yes, yes, it would decrease, to say the least, of how people are viewing the product, to say the least, because of the whole Kyle Larson incident, the Bubba Wallace incident, the whole IndyCar incident. But it's about how those treat how they view it, so to speak, because IndyCar has less problems because even though those guys have wrecked, still, it doesn't mean really anything. But like, people took it too seriously. Sponsors took it too seriously to where this is a life or death situation when it comes down to iRacing. iRacing really is just a game, and obviously that has been said, but it's not to where it is simulated, but it's not really to a point to where it's like you're feeling the G-force, you're feeling everything that goes on in the car. All it is that you're gonna feel it on a wheel. You're not gonna feel it when it comes to, crashing somebody or anything like that. So people will look at it as a game because it really is. So we don't call NASCAR Heat 4 a simulator and say that has all the aspects to it. So, I mean, a game is a game. So, I mean, there's not really, anything special to it other than it's just most people use it. There's, because like NASCAR, what is it, NASCAR season 2003, NR 2003? That game was mostly popular because it had its special unique in a way, and this is what iRacing does. But people take it too seriously to where it's like it's the best of the best. This is where we'll land you a NASCAR ride. When really, if you want to land yourself a NASCAR ride, all you got to do is just go out in the world of motorsports, drive in leagues, and see if you can get picked up maybe by, Kyle Busch Motorsports, or you can get picked up, in the IndyCar series or the Formula One, either or. That's how most people get picked up. Sure, iRacing is a thing, but motorsports in real life that's where people find their talent. That's where sponsors find their people. So,
All right, I'm gonna counter them. It's episode 2. I can't say that. I don't care. You are correct about how iRacing is sort of just a game, and all these antics. It's not iRacing's fault. I agree with that. In the end of the day, iRacing is just a game. Has a little bit of simulation effects. You could sort of manage it whichever way you want. It can either be a sim for you,
that
it
is
can be
true.
a game for you. It can be whatever. However, we're going to talk about not is it iRacing's fault, but is somebody going to go out there, buy an incredibly expensive PC, buy a membership, when they just went and saw somebody lose a sponsorship, somebody lose a ride or somebody just like a grown man wrecks somebody for the lead. Now, those are bad things, but just by how everyone reacts to it, or how even anti-racing fans react to this, like, oh, these people are just acting like children, it leaves a bad mark. And I do agree with you to a sense about how, yes, iRacing is just a game, it's just for fun. But how many people are actually going to go through that entire thought process, when they're going to go buy a game that's that expensive? I'm just saying.
That is true. I agree.
And with that being said, we're going to move on from. We talked about the guys going back on track and returning to the track, all the drivers looking to go racing again. But there's two drivers that are looking to make their return from the sport. One from injury this past season and one from seasons ago. It's going to be Ryan Newman and Matt Kenseth. Of course, Ryan Newman stepping back in his contract in Roush Fenway number 6 to hopefully finish out the 2020 season. Of course, he was injured in a horrible wreck at the Daytona 500 earlier this year. And Matt Kenseth is looking to fit in the Chip Ganassi 42 for Kyle Larson, who has been indefinitely suspended by NASCAR for using racial slurs, like we mentioned in the not in a NASCAR iRacing event, but was posted publicly after a free play event hosted by a bunch of in real life drivers, as well as a lot of esports known drivers. So moving forward in this, both drivers received vouchers to compete for the championship. Do you think either one of the drivers, Ryan Newman coming off injury or Matt Kenseth coming out of temporary retirement, do you think either of these drivers could possibly make a run actually at making the playoffs and trying to go after the championship?
Should I start off or one of you two do?
Whichever.
Larry, you go.
AJ, you can go. Larry hasn't talked much, so let's give it to Larry.
Well,
Speak up, Larry.
I could Alright, I think I could definitely see Matt Kenseth making a valid run at it. I think he has a lot of experience under his belt. He has a good car and team behind him. They haven't had as much luck as they've wanted in the past few years, but I think they could at least make a stab at it. There are a few races behind now, but luckily haven't missed as many as they would have since coronavirus. I don't know about Ryan Newman. He always seems to be on the bubble of making it, and missing a couple of races I think has definitely hurt his chances. But I could see either driver slipping into the playoffs, maybe with a shock win, and maybe even slipping into the championship. Slipping into the top 12. But I don't know if either are gonna go for the championship or even make it to the championship four.
Moving on to AJ, what's your opinion? And just to throw this out there, just to give a little bit more to the argument, Ryan Newman didn't actually make it to last year. He almost made it to the second round, but a missed chicane cost him at the Charlotte Roval for making it to the second round. So with that being said, is it the injury that's going to keep Ryan Newman from the playoffs and the races that he missed, or the ability of, like, did he lose any of that competitive edge, or just is his body not able to take the punishment from a full NASCAR season or the rest of the NASCAR season, or what could be a different reason for Ryan Newman possibly missing the playoffs if that does happen?
For me, honestly, I don't think Ryan Newman will lose his touch, so to speak, as much as everybody has been speculating when he comes back to Darlington this weekend, and the same thing for Matt Kenseth. Safe to say Matt Kenseth has never officially retired, to say the least. He's just didn't have a ride. But with that being said, no, I don't feel like Ryan Newman will. Of course, we know that Dale Jr., he has proven before when he had multiple concussions, he still had the drive to race, but then when enough was enough to where, he couldn't do it anymore due to concussions, that's when he stopped. And of course, we've seen Kyle Busch rebound back after breaking both of his legs and winning a championship in this same year, which, it's due to the playoff system that I believe shouldn't be here, because it gives people like Kyle Busch and Ryan Newman more of an advantage to get in because it's a win you're in situation, and it's not really, it's more of a tip, so to say. Sure, you may win a lot of races, but if you get inside the top 30 and you have enough points to make it into the top 16, then it's just, it's not all that great. But honestly, I do think Ryan Newman could have a rebound after missing 3 races. Um, and I think he would have missed more and kind of went down the ladder more, to say the least, if it wasn't for the whole virus that came around. But with that being said, I don't think Ryan Newman will lose his edge. Sure, he may not be quick on pace, and he's not going to be like Kyle Busch and just come back and just be dominant. It's going to take him a little bit after an accident like that at Daytona. It's going to take him a minute in order for him to get back and get used to the race car. Same as Matt Kenseth, but his is a different situation to where Matt Kenseth hasn't been in the race car since 2018. And so with that being said, Matt Kenseth, it's going to take him a little bit in order to get used to it. So with practice and qualifying out the window, it's going to be hard for Matt Kenseth to get back into rhythm when he gets into the 42 car. Now, do I really want to see these two drivers do well after, coming back? Absolutely. But if we're looking at reality of it, it's going to take these guys a while to get back into the rhythm of racing a race car. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on the whole situation.
BDF.
I think one of two things happened for Ryan Newman. I think either Ryan Newman really struggles this season and calls it quits, and by that point, I mean, he's 29th in the points right now. I don't see if Ryan Newman has a bad season, I don't even see him in the top 20 in points by the end of this one. So, that's option one. Option two, I think Ryan Newman goes gunning out of the gates. Like, this man starts to channel his, inner 2002 or 2003. But any way you cut it, I think Ryan Newman does not make the postseason, because really, the only few people who have missed a lot of races like that and have came back to make the postseason, you saw it was Kyle Busch in 2015 and Tony Stewart in 2016. And those two people had to win to get in. I mean, Kyle Busch was in the mid-20s in the points. Tony Stewart was barely there. Chris Buescher was 30. We don't talk about Chris Buescher. I just, in this competitive age, now if it was last year, maybe. But I feel like 2020 is a little bit more competitive in terms of who's racing who, if you know what I mean. Hendrick's a little better, so he's going to have to fight Jimmy Johnson this time. I know a little bit of bias there. He's going to have to fight Jimmy Johnson this time. I feel like Kurt Busch is going to be on his game this year. I feel like Austin Dillon's going to do better. I think Tyler Reddick's going to do better. Or that 8 car, because it's not really Tyler Reddick. Whatever. Is he in the 31 or is he? No, he's in the 8.
No, Tyler Reddick's
anyways,
in the 31.
So I feel like there's a little bit of more competition this year. I don't see Ryan Newman making the postseason, and that's the same thing with Matt Kenseth. Matt Kenseth could run in the top 10 every single race. I just don't see Matt Kenseth winning before the playoffs. And
but here's the question,
Kenseth will, in my opinion, I think Kenseth gets closer than Newman. But I don't think either of them make the postseason. And this is going to open people up. Like, you never know. Cole Custer might make a run. Tyler Reddick might make a serious run at this. Stenhouse in the 47's looking decent right now. DiBenedetto in the 21. I mean, you have all these different options that could possibly go out there and have playoff runs, because you just lost Ryan Newman. I mean, he's back, but he missed 3 races. And you just lost Kyle Larson. And Kyle Larson is a shoo-in every single year. So this is going to open up opportunities for other drivers. I just don't think it's going to open it up for Kenseth.
But here's the question, though. Is the 42, we've seen this situation before, I think back in 2008 when Michael McDowell got into the situation. Are they going to take the 42 points and give it to Matt Kenseth? Because maybe Chip Ganassi wants Kenseth,
I don't think you
guess,
can.
in a strong suit.
I believe the points follow the driver. We saw this situation when it happened, like BDF mentioned with Tony Stewart, times that other drivers would get in the car. The points would follow the drivers that were in the car. And
Yeah,
based on
because
the
there were
NASCAR
no
rule
points
book,
for Kyle Busch.
and when we look at the rule book, whether it's mid-season or even mid-race switches, it's whatever driver driving the car crosses the stripe at the race receives those points. So that's going to be the outlook on that. But we talked about Ryan Newman. BDF brought up the point of Ryan Newman possibly not going after this season. So that's going to transition us into the NASCAR future silly season predictions. We're looking at some of the top rides, and this is going to be the way too early silly season predictions, as a lot of drivers have been rumored to be switching around going into the 2021 season. First, we're going to start out with, of course, Ryan Newman's Roush Fenway number 6 car, which is rumored Ryan Newman does have the option to be able, or the Roush Fenway has the option to keep Ryan Newman in the 6 after this season, or in the contract. So with that being said, with Ryan Newman's injury and a uncertain future there, is it time that Roush Fenway puts a new face in the number 6? If so, who? Or will Ryan Newman be returning in 2021? We're going to start with the predictions with Larry B. the G. Larry, what's your prediction? Larry, there we go.
Can we have AJ or BDF first? I gotta think about this for a second.
Go ahead. We're going to go ahead and go to AJ then.
All right. So the way I'm going to stay one more year, because I don't think that anybody else is going to take his ride, so to speak. Because I feel like Ryan Newman's gonna. I feel like Ryan Newman's gonna stay in that ride until he can't do it anymore, because that's just where my head is thinking. But even if it were the situation to where Ryan Newman's not going to race in 2021, or is not going to stay longer with Roush Fenway, I definitely see somebody like Chase Briscoe or maybe Ryan Truex, one of those guys getting into the 6 car because of, one with Chase Briscoe, he's somewhat having a strong season. He's only won one race this season at Las Vegas, but he's been having a fast Ford Mustang, to say the least, in the Xfinity Series. So it could be an option of seeing Chase Briscoe in the Ford camp in the Cup Series, but then yet again at the same time, it's all about who the sponsors pick. It's what Roush Fenway thinks that someone's going to drive that 6 car. But if it were me, I would say Ryan Newman stays another year or a few more years until he can't do it no more.
All right, moving on to BDF. BDF, what's your prediction?
We should have Larry, because I'm about to write my silly season board out.
All
my
right,
God.
Well, let's see. Does Larry have his answer here?
I don't know. AJ's making a lot of sense to me. I don't know. I mean, I can
Just
see
gonna
Ryan
copy and
Newman.
paste AJ right there.
Yeah, I mean, I could see Ryan Newman going for another year or two. I could see, Ford Performance, Young Guns step into the ride. I think either happen 50-50, flip a coin, heads or tails. I don't know. I mean, so let's wait and see what happens
I'll
over the
go
season,
ahead.
I guess.
I'll go ahead and go with what my thoughts are while BDF's getting his board set up. My thoughts about that number 6 ride is, in my opinion, Ryan Newman's leaving after this year. After that wreck, I don't think there's any job for him to compete. That was a wreck that he was lucky to even survive. And I don't think that Ryan Newman will want to risk something like that again. Is it a freak accident? Yes, but Ryan Newman, of course, we knew was coming to the tail end of his career anyways. He similar to many drivers around him. Of course, this is Jimmy Johnson's last year, just to throw a name out there. So I think Ryan Newman coming to the tail end of his career, this could be the last season. If I look at anybody, if they want to bring anybody up there, I would say should be the number 1 name that you'd put, being in the Ford Racing Development family. And even though he's in a ride for Stewart Haas Racing, I could see him going to the number 6, a driver that I feel like he's not really a young gun, but he has ties to Roush Fenway Racing that could be that could make a comeback, possibly, and run another full-time season as a guy who is coming back already. I could see Matt Kenseth going back into the number 6 car and possibly making one more full-time season after this. His main outlook on why he, I'd say, retired from any competition after 2018 or took a break would be to, spend more time with his family. But he has mentioned recently after taking the ride at Chip Ganassi that, he needed a little bit of a rest period, wanted to do some things with his family and such. So I could see him stepping in and trying to reignite a flame, especially if this season goes well for him, and looking forward as far as that goes. So definitely I could see Chase Briscoe, but if you wanted to throw another hot take name out there, I'd say Matt Kenseth could also try for another run at Roush Fenway Racing. Now let's go to BDF, see if he has his board set up yet. BDF?
Hold up. I'm getting there. Calm down.
He's almost there. Just get. It's like a lazy.
I'm crossing
season.
out names right now.
I think we should save him till the end
I don't think,
when he's made his mind on
I don't think
everything
this
else.
guy's coming back. If we're doing a bunch of silly season predictions, I'm ready, but...
I would say let's just move on to the next driver while BDF finishes his board. So
No, I got it. I'm getting everybody.
He's got it. Okay, let's see. What's
the
your idea?
Six car. You know what? I'm gonna say this name just because he's starting to become a Ford development driver, and even this guy, he even had a handwritten letter to Rick Hendrick looking for that 48 ride a few months ago. But as I was talking before, I said either Ryan Newman was gonna have a really bad season or he was gonna prove himself. And I feel like either way it goes, I think he's going to feel content with himself or he's not going to feel like he can do it anymore. If he runs really well, it's going to be like, all right, I'm happy. I'm happy I came back for this season. But, I mean, I agree with you, Xpert. I don't see Ryan Newman coming back for 2021, especially after that accident. And I think it's going to be a high note for him if he retires this year. And I know he almost died in that accident, but it's going to be really – I think it's going to be a feel-good story that he's going to – come back to finish his career, finish out the season, if you know what I mean. So, my move for the number 6, I sort of hinted it earlier. This one is surprising. I feel like he could go to Haas, but the way the cards are falling, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be Corey LaJoie. I think LaJoie goes to the 6. He's on that Ford program.
Okay.
I know he wants to have a better ride than Go Fast. Obviously, everybody wants a better ride than Go Fast. So, I feel like the 6 car could be a good place to start, and if he does well, makes a postseason bid, he might be able to go up in the Stewart Haas, especially if somebody like Harvick or Boyer or Almirola gets old. You never know. LaJoie could be around in a few years, and I think this is going to be where it starts.
Well, Harvick, his contract doesn't end until 2023 or 2024.
Hey, it's 3 years
He's already
though.
been confirmed to be re-signed. So... with that being said, going on from the 6th car, let's move on. You mentioned Stewart Haas Racing, so let's go ahead and move on to the number 10. I'm going to go ahead and say my opinion because it's going to be pretty short and sweet. I expect Eric Almirola to stay in the 10 car. Smithfield being that main sponsor there, I expect as long as Eric Almirola is in the 10 car, Smithfield will carry him as far as he goes. So I expect him to stay in the number 10 car for Stewart Haas. Moving on, let's go switch back around. Let's go to BDF and switch the other way.
Number 10.
BDF. What? Mm-hmm.
I agree with you on this one. From what I'm hearing, both Boyer and Almirola are on the hot seat, and I think out of those two, even though Boyer is the one that has the flashier results, he's the flashier personality, of course, but I think Almirola, at the end of the day, is the one that generally will make it to the playoffs the majority of the time, and he'll run better. Like, even the past 2 seasons, Almirola did better than Boyer throughout the season. Now, Almirola did kind of falter last year in the first round, and Boyer made it through. But in 2018, Almirola, I know it was when Stuart Haas was really good, but he was so consistent. He ran so well every race. And I think Tony Stewart is going to think about that when he says, okay, who do I re-sign here? And both of them might end up going. None of them might end up going. But I think Almirola will be the one out of those two that gets re-signed to that team.
Moving on to Larry B. the G. If
Larry.
Larry's here.
Number 10
I'm not
car?
sure if Larry's
I
here.
think, yeah, I think
Oh, there he
I think
is.
Eric Almirola will stay. I don't see any reason for him to leave. He's got Smithfield, and yeah, as you said, Expert. We have, he has Smithfield backing him, so I think he'll stay in that 10 car.
And now, of course, AJ, with your thoughts on the 10 cars position.
Safe to say, I'm going to say that Eric Almirola will re-sign. I don't really think there's going to be. I don't see anybody that desperate to, or Stuart Haas really picking anybody desperate to go to Stuart Haas, to say the least, to take over the 10. I do believe if Smithfield is staying, then Eric Almirola is staying, just like Larry said. So, yeah, definitely saying that Eric's staying.
All right, so we all four agree on that one. That's going to be the first all green light on that one. But moving on, we're going from the 10 to what is expected to be a possible open ride in the Stuart Haas number 14. Clint Boyer, of course, being 4 years the elder of Eric Almirola, we all agree that Eric Almirola would be staying at Stuart Haas. But the question remains, would Clint Boyer be returning? It's been rumored that he'd be heading up to the Fox Sports booth after this season, calling it a career at the end of 2020. So it's going to leave the question mark, will Clint Boyer return, or who could be a face that could replace him in the number 14 car? We're going to start with Mr. AJ on that question. What's your opinion on the open ride, or the possibility of an open ride in that number 14?
So Clint Boyer is only 40 years old, and I just Googled that. So it's safe to say that he's still got a future ahead of him. I really do think he's going to sign, in my opinion. But even if he doesn't re-sign, I know a lot of people are wanting Larson to go to Stuart Haas. As much as that would be cool, and him, because of Tony Stewart, I don't really see Kyle Larson going to Stuart Haas. To say the least, I would. I know I already said about him earlier going to the 6, but Chase Briscoe does seem like a candidate to get into the 14. That or Corey LaJoie, because the 32 team is backed up by Stuart Haas Racing with some of its equipment. And I really do think Corey LaJoie, as much as he would go to Roush Fenway, I really do think he would go to Stuart Haas or Chase Briscoe. But, yeah, those are my two. So if Boyer stays, he stays. And if he's going to get released by the end of this year, I'm definitely going to say his replacement is going to be Chase Briscoe or Corey LaJoie. Now, where Clint could go besides broadcasting, that's really a toss-up in the air. He could go to Roush Fenway to take over Ryan Newman's if he retires, or, but definitely going to say Clint resigns.
All right, moving on now to Larry B. the G. Larry, what's your viewpoint on this?
I definitely think it's up in the air. I could see Clint Boyer stepping out of the ride. Quite a career, he's had a few good years in number 14. I think that would be a nice ending to it. As far as who would step into that car if he were to retire, I'm not sure, but I don't know if I see him returning next season.
All right, and we're gonna with that being said, we're gonna move on and see what BDF's viewpoint. BDF, what side do you think this coin could toss be? Boyer returning or a replacement, and if so, who?
Let me look. Okay. You know, I think, Boyer is 40, which is not that old, but we've seen some drivers step away before that age. And I feel like, it lines up perfectly. We look at the Fox Sports booth and we see Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon. And we had Darrell Waltrip there last year. And I feel like Waltrip leaving upsets the balance. It upsets the fluidity. It upsets everything that you would think of with a NASCAR calling booth or whatever. And I feel like Clint Boyer is that guy that almost everyone can relate to. And he's that guy that a lot of traditional NASCAR fans are going to want calling these races, along with Joey and Jeff Gordon. So I do think Boyer, with his other things that have happened this year with the Pro Invitational stuff, I think Boyer goes to the booth. That's where he's going to stay in 2021. Who actually takes the 14 ride? A lot of y'all throw names out there, and I don't remember what Xpert said. It could have been him. But, I feel like it's a little controversial, but I think Kyle Larson comes back, and I think he's going to go to the 14. They might renumber that, probably not. I think Kyle Larson will go to the 14. He has same upbringings as Tony Stewart, so obviously they're going to go well together. And Kyle Larson is very profitable. Now, sponsorships, of course, are always a problem, but I feel like they're going to find something for... I just think Larson's going to the 14. That's just my hot take.
I agree with BDF on that. I believe Larson could be the direction that Stuart Haas could take that if Clint Boyer does go up to the booth. I do believe Boyer will go up to the booth because he does fill that void that Darrell Waltrip left. In my opinion, like I said, I do agree with the Kyle Larson thing because Stuart Haas has kind of been a breeding ground for guys to reinvigorate their career. You saw Clint Boyer going from Michael Waltrip Racing to finding new successes at Stuart Haas, even though his career has kind of been on a disappointing side since then. He has won a few races. And also Kurt Busch, after his he's kind of became a new person whenever he switched to Stuart Haas and has now switched into that veteran role. So I could see Kyle Larson doing the same thing, going to Stuart Haas and being able to work out the kinks that he has just gone through in his career. Another name that I'd throw out there, and I do not see this happening fully. I do not support this, but I could see this being a hot take. A guy that has been looked at as very interesting by Tony Stewart, who is up on his contract after this year. If Joe Gibbs were to make the same mistake that they made with Joey Logano, I could see Eric Jones going to the 14 car as well, and that being a possible landing spot for him. But speaking of Eric Jones, we're going to go to the Joe Gibbs number 20, in which I truly believe he will stay. I don't think Joe Gibbs will make the same mistake he made with Joey Logano. Of course, the option to bring in Christopher Bell is there. So if you're Joe Gibbs, what's your choice, Christopher Bell or Eric Jones? We're going to go ahead and start with AJ.
Definitely Christopher Bell. But yet again, that's just me saying that because right now, of course, we're underneath a pandemic, and it's really hard to say at this moment in time of Christopher Bell going to Joe Gibbs. I will agree with you saying that Eric Jones will stay, to say the least. But with that being said, as soon as Christopher kind of develops a little bit within the stock cars, which every rookie does, or most rookies do, some don't. But I definitely see Eric Jones staying for at least maybe 1 or 2 years. And then I definitely see Christopher Bell going to the 20 after a while. So right now, Eric Jones stay, but in a few years, I see Christopher Bell going to the 20.
I will argue that before we get Larry's viewpoint. I will argue with that. I believe if they do end up keeping Eric Jones, I don't think that Christopher Bell would end up replacing Eric Jones in the 20. In fact, I feel like it'd be possibly Denny Hamlin or Martin Truex, who may slide to in the next few years, could be tossing up, possibly sliding somewhere else. Especially Martin Truex. Martin Truex was kind of one of the top guys, but has fallen to possibly the second or third driver spot at Joe Gibbs. Of course, those three are toss-ups on who's the first, second, and third driver, looking at Busch, Truex, and Hamlin. So it's going to be a question, of course, a very talented Toyota roster. Let's go to Larry and get his viewpoint on the Bell or Jones saga right there. What's your opinion, Larry?
I don't see Bell replacing Jones in the 20, at least for next year. I think we'll see Jones at least stay in the 20 car or for next season. I don't think the JGR team is in any rush to like, I know there's like a whole pipeline of talent that they've got going, but at the same time I feel like they're comfortable with their current driver lineup. Um, yeah, that's why I don't really have much of a.
All right, let's go ahead and switch it to BDF. BDF, Jones or Bell, your opinion?
Oh boy, Jones or Bell. I was torn with this one, but I say neither. I think Christopher Bell stays in the 95. I think Christopher Bell, I don't want to say this because in 2016, like Jones in 2016 is like Bell that we saw 3 years ago. Not 3 years ago, last year. I can't think. But anyways, Jones ran well in Xfinity in 2016. He did all this stuff, almost won the championship. And then in 2017, he got shipped off to a Toyota B team. And he's had a decently successful career, don't get me wrong, but like, when you're on a team with Hamlin, Truex, and Kyle Busch, it's hard to compare. And I think that's the same thing with Christopher Bell, but I think Gibbs is going to keep Christopher Bell around. I think Christopher Bell is going to replace one of the three veterans that are currently there, either if Kyle Busch or Hamlin retires, because those are Gibbs, like, protected. Like, if you know protected players, basically protected. Or if Truex goes somewhere, but to be honest, I think Truex retires before he goes somewhere, but that's another day. Whoever I think goes into the 20. This is an interesting one because Gibbs sort of did this in 2012, 2013 when Logano was out. And you were talking about making the same mistake. I think the driver who goes to the 20, my timeline is sort of like this. The 48 gets taken first, then the 14 gets taken. Usually the 20 is a little bit late on its decision. I think the number 20 will be in the hands of the horse face in 2021. I think Brad Keselowski's going to be on the 20.
Oh.
I think it's going to happen. And I think what's going to happen is Joe Gibbs is going to have 4 powerhouse drivers. That team is going to be stacked. You're going to have 3 champions on the team. And the one non-champion is Denny freaking Hamlin, 3-time Daytona 500 winner. That team right there is going to be very good, very talented. But I think it's going to be a fatal mistake. They might end up turning into Hendrick. They might have a lot of veterans like Hendrick Motorsports did and then slowly fall down. But I think 2021 is going to be a really good year in terms of drivers for Gibbs.
Definitely a big hot take on that one, but slowly switching to a team that, or a specific car that might not be a hot take. The number 42, I believe you can blurt out, of course, if you believe I'm wrong, but I believe all 4 here would agree that Ross Chastain would be looking to move into the 42 for Chip Ganassi Racing in 2021.
Yes.
No explanation needed. I don't think.
Yeah,
I think Ganassi's going to be smart with this one.
Yeah, no need to take
so
risks, you know. They have a.
All agreed. All agreed. Ross Chastain. Let's move on now to the number 2. Who I believe, in my opinion, will be a Ford connection as well as a Penske connection, as his dad works for Penske as well. I believe Austin Cindric will move up into the 2 car in 2021, replacing Brad Keselowski. BDF, let's go ahead and start with you on your opinion on the future of the Penske number 2 car.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on this one. I mean, we look at some of the candidates. You could talk about LaJoie, but I just don't see the connection with Penske there. And you could talk about Briscoe, but he's sort of in Haas's hands right now. I mean, You could say DeBenedetto moves up, but that's not going to happen. I already said Keselowski's out, but the main reason why I want the main reason why I think Keselowski's going to be out. Let's look at 2020 so far. We've only had 4 races, and Keselowski's gotten pissed at his teammate twice. I mean, there's already a little bit of tension boiling between those two drivers, and if I'm Roger Penske, I look at who's the most successful driver and who's the one that we can keep the longest. Let's see here. Logano's younger. He's had the best past 3 years. I mean, he had the Daytona 500. I think Joey Logano beats Keselowski here easily. And I think Keselowski gets the boot, and I think Austin Cindric goes in. Now, when either Logano or Blaney's contract goes up, we might see DeBenedetto go through, but I think DeBenedetto's going to be a journeyman. That's, once again, another episode. But I do think Cindric goes to the 2.
All right, Larry B. the G, next up on the podium, number 2 car. What's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I'm thinking Austin Cindric will take the number 2 because, as BDF said, definitely some tensions rising in Penske right now between those two teammates, Joe Logano and Brad Keselowski, and I think I agree with a lot of I genuinely agree with a lot of what BDF said. I think Austin Cindric has connections to Penske, and I think that's definitely the move for them to make.
All right, AJ.
Yeah, I think if we've all sit around here at the Knights table, we've all agreed that it's going to be Austin Cindric, to say the least. It's really no ifs, ands, or buts, to say the least. I feel like Logano has now become the veteran of the group, so to speak. Blaney, I mean, he's got some experience underneath his belt, but he's still developing of who he is. But definitely, to say the least, Austin Cindric is going to be in the 2. I really don't see Matt DiBenedetto driving the 2. It could be, and just put Austin Cindric in the 21. But at this moment in time, I do not see Matt DiBenedetto going to the 2. But Austin Cindric.
All right, and once, of course, we kind of agree Austin Cindric will be going into the number 2. And now it comes to the hot topic ride that we're looking at for today.
The 32?
Be a little biased on this one. Ha ha ha. It's going to be the Hendrick Motorsports number 48, one of the most coveted rides in NASCAR to date, being known as 7-time with that team and being one of the keys to success at Hendrick. There's a lot of things that go into this, as in Hendrick really doesn't have a cup-ready driver in their development system as of right now that are in the lower series. And Hendrick Mr. Rick Hendrick has already spoken out saying that they'd rather have a experienced driver to help out the young guns that are still there, that being Alex Bowman and William Byron, who have both signed extensions, as well as Chase Elliott. So with my opinion, and I know BDF might get a little heated about what I'm about to say here, or he may not like it, but I'm going to say that Horseface will be the Horseface will fill in at that number 48 car team. He has previous connections with Hendrick. They fell through, but I believe that that will be re-sparked, and Brad Keselowski will move to that 48 and be part of the Hendrick family finally. So we're going to go to AJ and then loop our way around to Mr. 48 himself. So AJ, what's your opinion on the coveted 48 ride?
Well, I look at it this way. Hendrick is looking for a veteran, which he should, to say the least, because of the fact that Hendrick desperately does need more veterans to help out. Not saying that Jimmy Johnson is not a bad veteran. Of course, he's won 7 championships. That means something. But I feel like it shouldn't be an all-class rookie field. I think after Johnson, it should be these 3 drivers. If one of the 3. But one is most likely than the other. Brad Keselowski, Ryan Newman, or Matt Kenseth. The reason why I say Ryan Newman and Matt Kenseth is because if we're looking at somebody who's going to be, if Ryan Newman is going to leave Fenway, and Roush Fenway's wanting to look for somebody that, is either another veteran or a rookie, then definitely, they'll do their thing. And I really think that Ryan Newman would go to Hendrick Motorsports. Matt Kenseth, even though he's 48, it still shows that he's kind of like the Mark Martin of this era, so to speak. We've seen Mark Martin, said that he would retire, even though, Matt Kenseth hasn't officially retired. He ran a part-time season, and now he's going to run the rest of 2020. I do see Matt Kenseth possibly running one more year full time and then calling it quits and driving the 48. But if Hendrick is looking for someone that that is still young but they have experience, then Brad Keselowski would be your man.
Certainly, and let's move on. We only have a few minutes remaining, and we, of course, want to fit in the F1 stats and all that news from Larry B. the G himself. Let's go to BDF 48 Gaming. BDF, this is your coveted ride. You've been a fan of Jimmy Johnson for so long. Who do you think will be the quoted 7-time successor?
Sorry to turn my lights. This one is going to be a tough one. Of course, I would love to see somebody like Brad Keselowski or Kyle Larson, hell, even Ryan Blaney. I know that's not going to happen. But to be honest, none of those candidates fit. And you talked about an older driver. I think Rick Hendrick might revert on this one. Chase Elliott is going to have completed 5 seasons by now. Bowman's going to be his 3rd season, but keep in mind he has a lot of experience in lower rides. I feel like Rick Hendrick is going to give enough trust to Chase Elliott and Alex Bowman that they can hold their own and they can nurture Byron. I know, 5th season, I think it's going to happen. Now, my pick is a little controversial, of course, and I definitely wouldn't have not said this before the start of the 2020 season. But because this guy won at Daytona in February, and he's not running too bad in Xfinity, I think it's going to happen, and here's another reason why. I think Gregson goes to the 48. Let's look at another driver that Hendrick Motorsports signed that wasn't as successful in Xfinity but then blew up in Cup. You know what his name was? Jimmy Johnson. So I think Rick Hendrick takes the gamble here. And if it doesn't work, fine. Because you still have Chase Elliott. You still have Alex Bowman that consistently run. You still have Byron who gets a bunch of poles, and he gets Jack Outs. I think where they are now, it's not like it was in 2001, but I think it happens, and I think it also happens because Rick Hendrick wants to clean out all the veterans. He wants to have a fresh team, a team that he can keep together for about 10 years. We talk about this early 2010s when it was Gordon, Johnson, Earnhardt, and Kane. That team lasted for 4 years. There is no way you can argue that Hendrick Motorsports was not the best team in that stand. My opinion, though. Could change.
All right, well, that's our take on the 48, and we're going to move on to the F1 news. All the hottest news in F1, including some small silly season developments there as well. And let's go to Larry B. the G to cover over the hot topics that are going on in F1 as of right now.
So lots of spicy stuff happening in Formula 1 right now. I know we have some silly season stuff to get to in a few minutes, but I just want to cover a few smaller topics. Ross Brawn introduces a new $145 million budget cap for 2021. It was originally set to be $175 million, but because of the pandemic, it has been lowered. I think this is definitely an interesting move because now it's one of those first steps in trying to get those front running teams and midfield teams a little bit closer. We know we've seen kind of that crevice continue to open and open as the seasons have went on, but I think this budget cap will definitely be it'll definitely go. I think it'll go a long way towards the first steps of closing that gap. I know you always have the threats of Ferrari leaving and threatening to leave, but that's the thing. Ferrari needs F1 and F1 needs Ferrari. I think this budget cap is a good thing. As far as when the season is going to get started, they're currently slated to have the Australian Grand Prix weekend. I believe the weekend of July 3rd. I think, with no fans in attendance, they have the minimum amount of people they need there. I think that's definitely going to be a good starting date. And that's when I wish NASCAR kind of slated their starting dates, but NASCAR is NASCAR and F1 is F1 as far as that is concerned. And yeah, we'll see where that goes from there. Of course, Silverstone offering to hold multiple races, but now looks like that might not fall through, or that might not go through. And of course, getting to some of the bigger silly season stuff, Sebastian Vettel steps away from Ferrari after 5 years of racing there. Definitely a shocker. I think we will have seen him for at least a couple more years. Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel coming to a mutual agreement that they will not continue their partnership. Carlos Sainz being signed to that seat alongside Charles Leclerc. He'll leave McLaren at the end of the season. Daniel Ricciardo filling in that McLaren seat, leaving Renault, and now, it's getting even crazier. Fernando Alonso being linked to that empty Renault seat for 2021. I think it's definitely looking very interesting, and the 2020 season hasn't even started yet. Yeah, that's what I've got.
Interesting.
Floor's open.
Xpert.
If anyone else.
All right. Well.
Before we go, I'm gonna talk about what WEC. Unless you're gonna keep talking, because I'm gonna wrap it.
No,
I'm gonna wrap it up with some
ahead.
W. Okay. So I know I'm not a freaking news person, but I'm out here because I saw this as being interesting. We all know 24 Hours of Le Mans, one of the biggest races of the year, probably the biggest race, most prestigious race of the year. Unfortunately, the past few years we've seen a little bit of competition degradation, and that is unfortunate. We saw Ford pull out, but that's all good. We were slated to have 5 competitive manufacturers in the GTLM class, and with the prototype class getting weaker and weaker, it looks like everyone's going to focus on GTLMs. But recently, both Porsche and Corvette pulled out their entries from the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and this is a big shocker because they always come in with power. They always come in looking to win. They're always up there during the races, and this really opens a power vacuum. Like, we're only going to have 3 manufacturers going for it: Aston Martin, BMW, and Ferrari, and those are probably the 3 cars that you can say, okay, these are the most different cars that you could ever come up with. So I think it's a little surprising, but it's not that totally unexpected because coronavirus has hit everybody financially, especially car companies, because you can't even go out buy a car, you can't even drive a car, you can't even break your car, you can't even go to the maintenance service to fix your car. So I see this happening. Porsche wants to continue their aims to the end of IMSA for this year, but yeah, there's a little bit of news there.
Definitely, and don't be afraid to join us on the VER Network. Just want to give a reminder, the VER Network will be having the VER Indy 250 this Sunday. You can catch us live. I believe it's going to be what time, BDF?
Race starts at 3. I'm hoping the coverage starts at 2:30, but that's up to you.
Well, we're going to try to get the coverage as close.
We also have B Lobby 2 tomorrow at 8:30.
We're not going to start late, believe me.
Certainly, it's going to be AJ and BDF on commentary. They're commentating for B Lobby, so definitely go join those guys and some B Lobby fun there as well. But with that being said, for everybody here, just want to thank you for joining us here on the Experts of Racing podcast for episode 1. Can't wait for many more with these guys. Also tune in to here on Twitch or the edited version on YouTube as well next week, as we have the Experts of Esports with ATLRA and Andrew Tinold. They'll be joining us on the podcast next week. Definitely going to be a lot of fun coming up planned in the next few weeks as well. But with that being said, go ahead and follow us on Twitch. The link will be in the description. Like and subscribe on YouTube. And for AJ, Larry, and BDF, I am the Expert, Joshua Franks, and we will catch you next time.